One of the most reliable ways to contribute to the world is not through self-promotion, but through self-restraint. We live in a culture that rewards people who present themselves as exceptional, people who highlight their achievements, advertise their success, and position themselves at the center of the story. Yet some of the most meaningful contributions people make come from the opposite impulse, the willingness to step back, to focus on others, and to act with humility rather than self-aggrandizement. I was reminded of that recently in a conversation with a congregant. Like many proud parents, she was telling me about her son. He was doing well in school. He had been accepted to a good college. He was earning strong grades. He already had secured a job after graduation. All of that was impressive, and she was understandably proud. And she continued with the story. Her son had gone to visit his grandmother in a retirement community. At some point, he was riding in the elevator with two women who also lived in the building. Later, one of those women mentioned the encounter to his grandmother. She said that the young man had been remarkably kind. He didn't talk about himself. Instead, he asked about them. He listened. He carried himself well in what could easily have been an awkward interaction between the generations. And when the congregant told me this story, she added a bit of wisdom. She said, "His accomplishments at school are important, but it means much more to me that he was kind, that he thought about other people instead of himself." Sometimes the most honest way to judge our children is not by what they tell us about themselves, but by what other people say about them. That instinct to measure success not only by achievement but by character is deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. Jewish sources speak about humility in many different ways, not as self-erasure and not as weakness, but as a way of placing ourselves properly within the world. So tonight I want to talk about 3 ways the Jewish tradition teaches us to be humble. I hope that it will gently move us towards something bigger than ourselves. One way that the tradition understands humility is openness. In Sivat HaRivash, a collection of teachings attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, humility is described as the foundation of spiritual life. A humble person does not see themselves as the center of every situation. Instead, they create space for other people and for God. When a person loosens their need to dominate every moment, something larger becomes possible. Relationships deepen, communities strengthen, the sacred has room to appear. Humility in this sense is not about shrinking ourselves, it's about recognizing that life is not meant to revolve around us. When we step back just enough to make room for others, we create the conditions for trust and connection to grow. A second dimension of humility is selflessness, particularly in the context of power. The rabbis were deeply aware of the dangers that accompany authority. Power easily feeds ego, titles can create distance, leadership can quietly shift from service to self-importance. And in the Babylonian Talmud, we read a striking observation. Rabbi Elazar said, "Any leader who guides the community with gentleness merits to lead them into the world to come." And the teaching suggests that power is not measured only by strength or decisiveness. It is measured by the spirit in which a person treats the people they serve. Authority exercised harshly may impose order, but it rarely builds trust. Gentleness, patience, and restraint are what allow a community to flourish over time. The same passage in the Talmud offers another telling example. Before appointing Bezalel, who is the artisan who is going to build the tabernacle, God asks Moses whether the choice is acceptable to him. Moses responds that if Bezalel is acceptable to God, then certainly he is acceptable to him. But God instructs Moses to ask the people as well. Moses doesn't do it alone. He cannot appoint someone to a position of power without consulting the community. Authority in Jewish thought is never meant to elevate a person above others. It's meant to serve them. And that idea runs against many of the assumptions of modern culture. Today, social and economic power is often associated with being the person whose voice dominates the room. But the rabbinic tradition imagines a leader who guides gently and who understands that the community ultimately belongs to the people who live in it. Then there's a third perspective on humility, and the most sobering of all: mortality. As we read in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Levitas of Yavne said, "Be very humble of spirit, for the hope of a mortal is worms." That's pretty direct and pretty stark. And it reminds us that human beings are temporary. Our lives are finite. Our accomplishments, no matter how impressive they may seem in the moment, eventually become part of the past. And this awareness is not meant to diminish us. It's meant to give our lives perspective. When we remember that our time is limited, the need to appear impressive begins to fade. What matters more is how we use the time that we have. Do we treat people with kindness? Do we share responsibility with others? Do we help build something that will outlast us? Humility grows from that awareness. When we recognize the temporary nature of our own lives, we begin to understand that we're part of something larger than ourselves, larger than our reputations, larger than our achievements, larger even than our own generation. Seen this way, humility becomes a form of wisdom. It helps us understand where we stand within the broader story of human life. So Jewish tradition consistently warns about the dangers of building yourself up. Again and again, it pushes us to remember that the world does not revolve around our individual success. At the same time, it emphasizes a quieter form of influence, grounded in humility and care of others. Those qualities rarely attract the same attention as visible success. They do not generate headlines. They are not easily measured or advertised, yet they are often the qualities that sustain families, communities, and institutions over time. The young man in the elevator did not set out to demonstrate a moral principle. He simply treated the people around him with kindness. And that small moment revealed something about the kind of person he was becoming. And in the end, that may be the deeper lesson. The most meaningful contributions we make may not be the moments when we place ourselves at the center of the story. They may be the quieter moments when we step back just enough to make room for someone else. Shabbat Shalom.